It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Tuesday, April 15th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is looking forward to seeing what we can learn from the Columbus Blue Jackets in their development.
A few things.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. I've been podcasting about the Flyers, the NHL, and hockey for a decade. I'm here with prospect expert and Flyers credentialed reporter for 19 years, Russ Cohen. To keep up with our latest episodes and Flyers news, you can find us at Locked On Flyers on all your favorite socials, and of course, here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are going to get to Phantoms Tuesday today. We're so close to the end of the season, and we've got some new guys to talk about, including Ty Murchison. Excited to get to that. And our discussion about the Columbus Blue Jackets. We've been doing these game previews in the context of what can we learn, or what can the Flyers learn from these opponents in their rebuild moving forward. And I think it's been a different and interesting twist on a game preview. So stay tuned for that. In the meantime, the Reading Royals of the ECHL have clinched a playoff spot. So we'll have two of the three teams in the Flyers vertical in the playoffs, which, would like it to be the Flyers themselves, but we'll take it, I guess, from the other two teams. And as we know, Denver Barkey has been tearing up the OHL playoffs. He has now racked up 19 points, 9 goals, and 10 assists in 6 playoff games in the OHL so far. Game 3 of round 2 is tonight for London versus Erie. And Erie is the home of Malcolm Spence, a draft-eligible prospect we just profiled on last Thursday's show. We have a spreadsheet with everybody we've talked about thus far. A link to it is in the show notes, as well as pinned to our Blue Sky and Twitter profiles. Not to make Oliver Bonk feel bad, because he's still a great player, but he's only got 4 points in those 6 games.
It's all right.
But still, London is playing great, and again, they're going to go far in the playoffs. So
they might win it all again. They might win it again next year. At some point, to be honest, I ignore the points.
Yep. We'll see. I'm sure he's not, and I'm sure.
No,
London
but I'm just saying,
not.
Because there's just too many players.
Yeah, that's fair. That is totally fair. Now, the Columbus Blue Jackets, they are in an interesting situation, as are we relative to their playoff hopes. We are recording this before we know the outcome of the Montreal Canadiens game last night, which will determine if they will make the playoffs. Each of the teams, as of Monday before the game starting, had 2 games remaining. The Habs, all they have to do is win one of those 2 games.
Sounds easy.
I know, but you never know. And so the game against Columbus tonight could mean absolutely nothing, or it could mean absolutely everything. That is, in our world, it's to be determined. But regardless, I do think that Columbus is in a really strong position, a surprisingly strong position this season, I would say. And you have to think that either way, this club is going to be very proud of the season that they put together.
Yeah, no question. I mean, they definitely surprised. They've had some players step forward. It's a lot like the Flyers season last year for most of it until the breakdown started to happen. So, but we've seen this happen. And just because they're close to the playoffs and it may even make it, there's no guarantee next year. Some of those top teams, sure. You want to tell me like Vegas will be there next year already? All right, Winnipeg, those teams. Sure, you could, the Leafs. But a team like this, you don't know.
No, it's true. And it is also really interesting because they decided to kind of hold firm at the trade deadline this year, right? They did nothing. Their big move last summer was actually a subtraction, where that was the big Line A deal, which was ironically with the Habs, who they are battling for this playoff.
And Line A, for the most part, has been a success there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know recently they've kind of dinged him a little bit. They moved him to the fourth line,
But
but
he's a
I
power
think
play specialist. It's
he
fine.
is. He is. So, I just find that fascinating given where we are right now. But I think it is also interesting how they did decide to do nothing. They weren't buyers or sellers. And I
Although
think,
to be fair, sometimes that's the Don Waddell way, and it's not necessarily
yeah,
a, a decision that is like every team would make, but it's something that he's done before.
that's what's interesting is that because they're a borderline team, it really did not make sense for them to be big sellers in the
Right.
grand scheme, right? To try
Right.
and progress as a team. But at the same time, they didn't do anything to put themselves over the edge to maybe be more of a guarantee to make the playoffs this year.
Well, I mean, that's true. But we could talk about their goaltending and the change that they've made temporarily, and maybe that helped to make this change instead of keeping Jet Reeves in the minors. Like maybe that's what precipitated this.
Right. It could be. And that's where I think you can start having a discussion about the Flyers versus Columbus here. I think it works from goaltending out for both teams in a lot of
It
ways.
does.
Now, we know Columbus has had just horrific luck when it comes to
Oh yeah, I mean
goaltending.
we could go back and it's a pretty horrific
Yeah,
story. Like I get it.
it is. It is. And like Bobrovsky is really the last kind of
Yeah.
solid goaltender that they've had. Flyers have been in a similar situation
Yeah.
and, Flyers were a borderline playoff team last year. I mean, again, punching above their weight a little bit, but still a borderline playoff team. This year, not as much. And
Right.
goaltending has been a big part of that. And I think,
Yeah.
where do these two teams intersect on that
I
conversation?
mean, where they intersect is Merzlikins is the reason you don't give Sam Ersson like a 4-year deal now.
Yep.
So there's that. You would learn that right away. Jet Reeves is the reason, like with Dean Evison saying, well, I don't know why he wasn't called up earlier. You have to ask Don Waddell. It's not necessarily a slight on Don, but that's just shows that Don's in charge of personnel and Danny's in charge of personnel too. And they've been kind of fooling around with their goaltending. And honestly, like right now, Brad's not really in charge of the goaltending, and John barely was. So that's something where sort of management really is more in charge of goaltending these days with organizations for the most part. And so that does affect, how it goes. A lot of coaches are hands off now with goalies, and they're just like, yeah, there's a goalie rotation, whatever. I'm focusing on other stuff.
Yeah, and Columbus, last made the playoffs in the bubble, like the Flyers. That was a
Yep.
round one loss. Before that, they had a round two loss and two round one losses. And
The round twos as
basic,
far as they've gotten.
yeah, basically didn't make the playoffs from their inception for a
Right.
very long time, right? And so I think, it's hard to compare Columbus to the Flyers in a lot of ways just because this is a small market versus a long suffering bigger market here,
Yeah.
right?
Like, when the Flyers are doing a little better, they'll have more opportunities for players that want to go there. So because of the market. So that is a slight advantage. Talent wise right now, think Columbus has a little edge here. So
Yeah.
because they've got some guys, probably 3 or 4 of them big names trending up for them. Marchenko becoming a big name now. And so, that's something the Flyers don't really have going now. It looked like they may have been in that direction and they've been getting mixed results. So that's something where it shows how the ball can get advanced when that happens. What it also shows is it's hard to figure out what year it's going to happen.
Yeah. I think also you have to look at it as Zach Werenski goes, so goes Columbus
That's
in
fair.
a lot of ways. And
And the
so when
Flyers
he's
don't
been,
have a Zach Werenski.
yeah, now Zach Werenski gets hurt
He does.
quite a bit, and so you can see the difference.
Oh, yeah.
It's very, very obvious. So that's, I think, an interesting twist that
It
Columbus has
is.
had to deal with, and that we've seen like him and Fabro together have been a phenomenal
Yeah, they've
pairing.
been really good.
Yeah, so I think, is that something the Flyers could learn from? Probably a little bit.
I mean, they
Now,
have a cannon. The Flyers have gritty. I would take the cannon. I kind of like the cannon, to be honest.
I don't know. I would rather have cake than a cannonball come at me.
Ah.
But, there is that.
Excuse me. That's funny.
But I also think we do have to acknowledge that Johnny Gaudreau's passing obviously had a huge impact on their season. And in some ways, it's allowed them to gel as a team and overcome something in a horrific way that we would never wish on anybody. But I'm wondering if there's some sort of emotional bump that they've gotten this year. And I think without him, that was a superstar level player, not top, but pretty elite player going to a small market like Columbus. And that could have been, a get the ball rolling on that sort of thing that maybe isn't there now. And it's a very confusing dynamic as to what the long-term impact of this.
I mean, this is what shows that sports can be hard.
Yeah.
I would say they did get an emotional bump, but then they lost Monahan and Gudbranson for a while.
Yeah.
And now they have him back for like this playoff run. And Monahan means a lot to that team. And he was Gaudreau's best friend, or what I can gauge as his best friend. And so, those things are big emotionally and otherwise.
Yeah. So, the Flyers obviously have not had to deal with that sort of thing. So there's no way to really.
I mean, the Rangers had that with Marty St. Louis' mother when he was a player, and that kind of galvanized them the one year. It could happen.
Yeah. So I God forbid anything like that happen.
Oh yeah.
You don't anyone on either.
It's just one of those things.
Again.
If it happens, that might happen to your team, when sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how all of that compares as both teams try and rebuild. And one of the ways the Flyers are doing that is by bringing in some new guys to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. And we're going to talk about them coming up next. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? You can crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts, and each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. And I love having them at my desk while I'm working. And a little ways back, I had some friends over for a movie night. Instead of popcorn, we had bowls of a variety of flavors, which everybody loved, but the Wonderful Pistachios chili roasted no shells and the sea salt and vinegar no shells were the biggest hits. I've bought a ton more of sea salt and vinegar no shells since then. Wonderful Pistachios is a complete protein, providing all 9 essential amino acids. These little green wonders pack a protein punch, so get snackin'. Get crackin' with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. On tomorrow's show, we, of course, are going to recap the game against Columbus. We're going to also talk about this almost official new agreement between the NHL, the NCAA, and the USHL, and see how that might affect Flyers prospect development now and moving forward. Plus, we're going to answer your mailbag questions, so make sure to get those in. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, send us a message on any of our socials, or comment on our YouTube channel. Russ, we are in the home stretch of the Lehigh Valley Phantoms season. They had their 3rd and 4th to last game this week, where they had a split decision, losing to the Syracuse Crunch 2-1, and then following it up with a huge victory over them Hershey Bears, who lead the division 5-1. It was a tremendous victory, and 4 of the 5 goals in that game were scored by Phantoms defensemen, which was a really interesting plot twist in that game. Now, a little asterisk is that obviously in the waning games of the season, teams like Hershey, who clinched the division a long time ago, are kind of rotating players and, maybe took their foot off the gas a little bit, but still, it is Hershey. And it was a really solid game from the Phantoms. Now, we still don't know the opponent yet for the playoffs because the Phantoms and Springfield have 2 games left each, and Springfield is facing Charlotte for both of those games, which is pretty rough for them, to be honest, and the Phantoms are facing Cleveland and Hershey, which is also its own kind of rough.
Yeah.
So really anything can happen, but, currently the Phantoms are in 5th place and Springfield is in 6th place, but they are separated by 2 points and have 2 games left each. So, you know,
Yeah.
we'll see here. But right now, Wilkes-Barre Scranton is in 3rd and Providence is in 4th, and they are separated. They aren't separated. They have the same number of points right now. So
Okay.
again, anything can happen here,
Yeah.
and we will not know probably until the last game of the season who
Yeah.
they're facing and the schedule. And so hopefully we'll be able to preview
Like, they
that
may not even get a home
next
game,
week.
right? Because they sometimes play 3 in a
Hmm.
row, right? Somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll see how that comes out in the wash. But they are certainly getting the reinforcements for the playoffs. As we know, Ole Lexell and Rodrigo Abels are back with the Phantoms, and Jett Luchanko has been playing for them. Alex Ciernik has been playing for them. And then Ty Murchison made his Phantoms debut this week as well, a defenseman. And we were surprised by the Ty
Mhm.
Murchison signing a little bit, given the
Yeah.
timing. Maybe we thought it would be another year before he did it, but he's with the Phantoms nonetheless. And yeah, I think he had a pretty solid debut. I think when you're a
Okay.
defenseman coming into the pro game at the AHL level, like you gotta play a very basic game
You
and a
do.
very conservative game because you do not want to be making those huge mistakes out there. And you just gotta be conscious of your positioning here. And I think he did that. I think he stepped up and he had 2 shots on goal on the game on Friday. He didn't versus Hershey, but Hershey is a very different team than
Right.
Syracuse, so he's probably instructed to be a little bit more conservative in that
Sure.
game, and definitely should be. But I thought he had pretty solid positioning.
Yeah, I mean, he has some
Um,
ability for sure.
yeah, he definitely battled, but I do like what he was able to do out there so far at the AHL level, and I think he obviously needs a little bit more time to cook, but overall, very, very pleased with his
Yeah.
first 2 games.
Now I have a question to ask, and it's a
Yeah.
legit question in the sense that are they trying to push a narrative with these lines, or are they trying to play the best people in the
Nope.
best spots?
They're having 0 answers with these lines, so we can talk about that because so this top line of Lixell, Luchanko, and Wisdom is a deliberate line, and that is a line that's designed to go into the playoffs.
Why?
I would s because I think they want Lixell, who's very strong at the AHL level and is a
Right.
big shooter. Like, he is I mean, interestingly, he has finally dropped to number 2 in the scoring for the
That's good.
Phantoms with
In a
that
way,
time he
that's good.
spent away. It's yeah, but Luchanko needs an Ole Lixell right now.
Sure. But my question to you is he's not producing offensively. Depending on
No.
who they go up against, do you want him to potentially get crushed going up against the number one center in the playoffs? Like, that's not good for him either. Why not have him on the second line with Lixell? Lixell can play on any line. This doesn't have to be your top line. That's my whole thing.
Well, and it may end up not being the top line.
Right.
I think, these lines are also the order that they're reported. It's not necessarily
Fair.
the top
But I'm just
line,
saying, you
but
understand where I'm coming from.
totally.
Like there's a easing in thing here with Luchanko that I think
Yeah.
they have to consider.
Sure, and I think, that's a good segue to talk about Jett Luchanko's play here because, again, I do think he's struggling, and I
Yeah.
think that, he took a pretty bad roughing penalty on Friday versus Syracuse that I didn't think was good. 0 shots on goal
Frustration. Was it
versus
out of frustration,
a
perhaps?
little bit, a
Yeah.
little bit. 0 shots on goal versus Syracuse, only 1 shot on goal versus Hershey, and in a game where they scored 5 goals,
Right.
for him to had only one shot. He needs to shoot more. And I think they're trying to encourage that by having him on a line with Wisdom and
But
Lixell.
when
And
you're a number
it's,
one center in the AHL and you have to cover some of these really good
I
centers that are
know.
real long-term pros,
Yeah.
it's sometimes hard for shot creation to happen.
Yeah. And I think that's the delicate balance here.
Yeah,
And I do think that he needs something to kickstart him offensively. And I think that, they obviously only have 2 more games to figure that out.
right,
But I do think that he needs something to figure out how to play his game, because
right.
that's where I think, we know he's a two-way player and
Yeah, of
that
course.
he's pretty strong
But he's going up
defensively.
against different kind of talent now. The
Mhm.
OHL to the AHL is a big jump. Big. It's a lot more physical in the AHL than it is the OHL. Like there's some big differences here.
Right, and I think that's been part of the problem, and that in some ways it's really good that he's spending time in the
Sure.
AHL, because he's learning these things kind of a little bit more sheltered, so
Yeah.
that the next time he takes a run at an NHL job, he'll be in a better position to do it.
Yeah.
But I think the playoffs, it's gonna be a really good experience for him.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it's a big difference between AHL almost playoffs and NHL preseason. Big difference.
Yeah, it really is for sure. But we've got a lot more to talk about, including Alex Ciernik and some other standout players and goaltending, as we always like to talk about when it comes time to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. We are going to do that coming up next.
Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. I used Upwork when I had my website created, NHLDraftBuzz.com. If you need help with a marketing campaign, Upwork can connect you with a freelance expert who delivered incredible results. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's Upwork.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today.
All right, continuing our discussion about the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Alex Ciernik was scratched on Friday and played on Saturday. This is, again, part of the rotation that they're
Yeah, because they
trying
have 100
to,
players.
right, at this time of year. And so it was only natural he was going to get scratched at some point in this run of games, but he got his first pro point. He
There you
got an
go.
assist on the
Okay.
5th goal in the game on Saturday. He's still doing his thing, playing
Mhm,
his game. You can see him darting through guys,
mhm,
and
mhm,
sometimes he tries to overdo it and do too
mhm.
much, but that's also his game.
Right.
But I think he's definitely learning to settle down a little bit. I've noticed some progress
That's good.
on that front, and I think that they talked to him. Actually, Bob Rochuk talked to him between games, and he seems to have a really good attitude about and knowing what he needs to
Yeah,
learn.
he's a
And
longer term player anyhow. He's got to
yeah,
spend good long time in the AHL.
yeah, absolutely. I think so. But they certainly did benefit from the return of Lixell and Rodrigo Abels.
No doubt.
Abels had a goal and an assist versus Hershey on Saturday. He was the lone forward to get a goal
Right.
in that game. Anthony Richard had 3 shots on goal and a goal versus Syracuse. He was the lone goal for the Phantoms in that game. So I think he's kind of getting back to where he was
Yeah, I think so.
before, which is a good thing.
He's an
And then
important
Ethan,
guy for the playoffs for sure.
he really is. So it's good to see him getting on the board closer to the playoffs. Ethan Sampson continued to have nothing but great things to say about him. He scored his 12th goal of the
Yeah.
season on Saturday against Hershey, and
Yeah, he's
now
kicking in now.
he really is. He's got 24 points, and for a guy that's not like a scorer per se, like
Well,
for
he
him to
played
have,
power play in juniors. Like he if you look it up, he had some points and he was good on the power play.
right, but for the Phantoms, he has not been a
No, I get
scorer.
it, but this is the Phantoms. Like sometimes they
Yeah.
make weird decisions anyhow.
They do, they do. So he has kicked it into gear with 12 goals and 12 assists this season. So
So
I
here's a
think,
question I have for you.
yeah.
So looking at the proposed pairings, is Hunter McDonald actually better than Adam Yinning? Because I don't think so yet, and I kind of wonder about that.
You know, a month ago, I would have said not a chance. I think things are balancing out. Now, I think it's Yinning he's had his confidence knocked down a
Okay.
little bit. I think, he has had some good games here and there, but I think just the lack of an NHL shot recently, I think could be having an effect on him. And I think McDonald's game has gotten elevated over the
Okay.
last month or so. I actually think that when he's paired with Belpedio, who's a very responsible
Yeah,
but
he
yet
is.
aggressive defenseman, that is a great D partner for
Okay.
Hunter McDonald. And I think,
All right. So we'll see how he does in
sometimes,
the playoffs in that spot.
yeah, I think that's going to be a huge, huge test for him.
Hmm.
I really do. And again, they've been doing a whole bunch of rotation. So McDonald played with Belpedio on Friday and
Yeah.
Sampson on Saturday.
Yeah.
So it's good experience to play with all these different
For
guys
sure.
too. And Ben Gleason got on the board this week too. It was only as one of the defensemen who scored, and he's a good support defenseman on that team.
Yeah.
He had been injured for a while, so he's kind of getting back to his regular
Okay.
level. So
And he's a veteran,
so
so they
that's
might
good.
need him.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see, because you look at the upcoming games this week that I mentioned earlier. On Friday, they're playing Cleveland. That's the Phantoms' last home game. And according to Ian LaPerriere, that is the lineup that we'll probably see in the playoffs. This will be
Okay.
their last
Right.
game where they're going to
Dress
just
rehearsal.
dress rehearsal for the playoffs here.
See, I was
And
speaking
then,
your lingo.
yeah, yeah. And then, love my theater terms. And, Saturday will be the curtain call
Right.
of the season and at Hershey. And I think they'll like kind of let it loose a little bit. And I mean, we'll see if the playoff position is locked by then or not.
Hmm.
And Lappy could change his mind, but the Friday game is the one to keep an eye on for
Okay.
sure, as far as what they plan to do going into the playoffs. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what they do with Grabenkin first off, because obviously, like, he did not play for the Phantoms on
No.
Saturday because he got that call up without not being a call up for Sunday.
Right.
But maybe he would have gotten scratched on Saturday anyway, who knows.
Right.
But I think it'll be interesting to see the Abels Grabenkin
Well, technically,
combo.
Gulbenkian is with them at the moment
No,
because
he
the
is.
last, yeah, that was the last
Yeah.
move. So they'll definitely
Right.
use
I'm
him.
just saying from a lines perspective
Okay.
and what might show up on Friday's game to see what our playoff preview could look like.
Gotcha.
I think I would keep the line that they had on Friday's game, even though they lost that game,
Yeah.
with Gendron, because I think Gendron is the prospect that you want to push in the
Yes.
playoffs. So Abels and
And he's
Grabenkin
got a
would be
great shot. Like if he can get on
yeah.
fire, that's a big deal.
Yeah, so to have him with Abels, who's reliable at the AHL level, and Grabenkin, who could make literally anything happen, who knows? I think that's a good combination there. And
Yeah,
then
it's weird. The third line's a little weird because
it is
the
weird. I
talent's a
don't know what
little.
they're going to do there.
Yeah, I don't know what they're doing.
I think Jacob Gaucher as your 3C makes sense. It's who do you put with him?
Right.
That's the big question. And I
Right.
don't know if Ciernik there's enough data to know if he makes sense. Brendan
Right.
Furry had some really good games for a while, but he's cooled off a little bit.
I
Is
mean,
it
I'd
going to be
probably have Ciernik watch at the beginning, to be honest.
yeah, yeah. And so J.R. Avon hasn't been reliable enough
No.
to move up there. So is it going to be Gaucher and two vets? Probably. Like, is Richard and Wilson going to be with him? I would say probably,
Yeah.
but who knows?
Right.
So now the goaltending question is
Yeah.
probably the biggest question here. I mean, Parker Gahagan has become their de facto number one at this point, although Cal Peterson did play very, very well against Hershey this past week, and he tends to do that. So my guess is that he'll play against Hershey again for the season finale, but and then Parker Gahagan will play against Cleveland on Friday. That would be my guess.
I mean, I would just say that if if the Flyers don't send Kolosov down, then something weird's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I don't know. I think it is going to be an interesting look ahead this weekend in our final 2 regular season games. We'll see how they turn out and what's going on with the playoffs, and we'll talk about that on Phantoms Tuesday next week. That will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back tomorrow to talk Flyers versus Columbus, the new junior hockey situation, and answer your mailbag questions. So let us know what they are via any of our socials at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail or comment on our YouTube channel. I'm Rachel. I'm on Blue Sky and Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology on the same socials, SPRTSOLOGY.
Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen today. For your next listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. So you can get local analysis on a national scale on NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL. You can find it on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Have a great day, everyone.